السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين، أما بعد. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. Tonight's lesson is on اللؤلؤ Marjan فيما اتفق عليه الشيخان, hadiths or hadiths or hadith. And that's a very common mistake in English. Many people, they say speaking or in a translation hadiths. There's no such thing as hadiths. You either want to say hadiths, making the Arabic word into English with an S for plural, or you're going to mention the actual Arabic plural ahadith. Simple, but commonly ignored, right? Hadiths. I read 5 hadiths tonight. That's fine. The author mentioned 10 hadiths. Or you're going to say ahadith, but you're not going to say ahadiths. That's how we say kuffars. You see all those kuffars over there? You see those kafirs? Or kuffar, right? طيب, خير إن شاء الله. والله أعلم. All right. So tonight's lesson on اللؤلؤ Marjan, بإذن الله. Let's adjust this. This is better tonight. Different vibe, different flow. So we're still in Kitab al-Hajj, and we reached chapter number 43, volume 1, page 407. The author, Sheikh Muhammad Fuad Abdul Baqi, may Allah have mercy upon him, he says, Babu bayani anna as-sa'ya bayna as-safa wal-marwati ruknun la yasihhu al-hajju illa bihi. Hadith Aisha radhiyallahu anha an Urbata annahu qala qultu li Aisha radhiyallahu anha زوج النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وأنا يومئذ حديث السن أرأيت قول الله تبارك وتعالى إن الصفا والمروة من شعائر الله فمن حج البيت أو اعتمر فلا جناح عليه أن يطوف بهما فلا أرى على أحد شيئا أن لا يطوف بهما فقالت عائشة كلا لو كانت كما تقول كانت فلا جناح عليه أن لا يطوف بهما إنما أنزلت هذه الآية في الأنصار كانوا يهلون لمناه وكانت مناة حذو قديد وكانوا يتحرجون أن يطوفوا بين الصفا والمروة فلما جاء الإسلام سألوا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم عن ذلك فأنزل الله تعالى إن الصفا والمروة من شعائر الله فمن حج البيت أو اعتمر فلا جناح عليه أن يطوف بهما. So chapter number 43 states, Sa'i between Safa and Marwa is a rukn of Hajj, and Hajj is incomplete without it. Safa and Marwa, walking between the 2 points, the 2 mounts, moving between the 2 is something which is obligatory, something which is necessary, and something which is an absolute must. And if it is forgotten, ignored, you don't have the ability to do it, you have no Hajj. And this is what's meant by the word ruknun. Arkanul Hajj, Arkanul Salah, Arkanul Nikah. The pillars of the prayer, the pillars of Hajj, the pillars of a successful marriage, the pillars of this, the pillars of Islam. Things that if they're missing, then that which is supported by them will fall down. So a rukn, obviously, linguistically, it's important to understand the word rukn as well. Because a rukn is something which is going to be where in a building? The pillar is going to be where?
The bottom.
At the bottom? Not necessarily. Could be the top. Right? Just as it's on the bottom, it's also half empty, half full. Right? Where will the pillars be in the building?
In the 4 corners.
Corners, centers. When we say pillars, when we say columns, it's important they're going to be where though? They're going to be inside of the building.
Right.
They're inside of the building. The paint, the carpet, the fabric, whatever is used, the decor, it has to be what with the rest of the, with the rest of the inside. It has to be what? It has to be in sync. Correct? If it's stone, if it's marble, if it's rustic, if it's wood. So the pillar, the column in actuality is a part of the building. It's something, number one, that must be there. Number two, not only is it a must, but it is actually a part of it. It's a section of it. And the proof of that is that the color, the painting, the fabric, you're going to take that into consideration. You're not going to have a marble or a marble column with some other type of floor or wall covering which is totally out of sync, out of whack. You understand this? So when we talk about a pillar of the hajj, it's something that does not come when? It doesn't come before the hajj. Rather, it comes when? During the hajj. It has to be inside of the hajj. And there's no way for a person to not do it and have a valid hajj. Understand? As far as a prerequisite, as far as something which is mandatory, wajib, then that's what? Different story. The recommended act could be inside too. Wajib could be inside. But it's not the same as a column. Something that you cannot miss. A pillar, something that you what? You can't miss it. You understand this or not? It's something that's going to stand out. And it's an absolute must for that thing to survive. So when you read and study a book on the pillars of the prayer, the conditions of the prayer, the first thing is to understand the terminology and the jargon. And not just to memorize it and sit. But to what's meant by ruknun min arkan as-salah. The shurut, the prerequisites of salah are things that must what? They must be found when? Before. Before. Rukn is inside. Wajib is what? Inside. Right? Something which is wajib is not the same as rukn. A wall is not the same as a column. A wall can collapse without the column collapsing, without the roof collapsing. Okay? So these things during Hajj that must be done. There's no way, no excuse, no exemption from performing these acts which are called arkan. The next discussion is, where did the Prophet ﷺ say in a hadith, weak or da'if, weak or sound, that the pillars of Hajj are 10 or 5 or 4? The pillars of the prayer are 14 or 20 or 3. Did the Prophet ever say that, sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Prophet never said that. So where do the scholars of Islam get this from? When they say these are the numbers of pillars of the prayer, conditions of the prayer, invalidators of wudu, and validators of Islam, nawaqid al-Islam, where do they get this from? Looking at what? Take in everything. They look at everything. They investigate everything. And they look at that which the Prophet ﷺ commanded with. That which the Prophet ﷺ prohibited. That which the Prophet ﷺ told the man to do again. That which the Prophet ﷺ said, you have no slaughter. You have no hajj. You didn't pray. That which the Prophet ﷺ, etc., etc. And then they categorized. They put it in order. They laid it out, sifted through the text, and came up with. And this is why scholars differ on certain things. This madhab says it's a pillar, and they say it's only wajib. Well, how can that? Everyone understand this or not? So the categorization of the arkan, of the shurut, of the wajibat is something which is based off of ijtihad. It is not direct revelation from Allah. It's based off of ijtihad. Right? But the actual content, what they're saying, of course, is what? That's going to be the revelation, the Quran and Sunnah. Now, covering one's odor for the prayer. Is that a condition of the salah, or is it just obligatory? Some say it's only obligatory, that you have to do it, but if you didn't do it, your prayer still would be valid. And others say, no, it is a what? Rukn, or a shart. It's a prerequisite. Why do they differ? Because of understanding and interpreting the text. Understanding and interpreting the text. The Prophet clearly told us to cover ourselves. Allah clearly told us to do what? To cover ourselves. But the prayer is invalid if some of your odor falls out or isn't covered. That's a different discussion. And there are other issues as well. So this is the rukn, pillar. A pillar of anything. Prayer, marriage, divorce, whatever it may be. Huh? And from that is moving between Safa and Marwa. That's first and foremost. That's first and foremost. Right. So therefore, the person who's going to make hajj, he's going to learn about the virtues of hajj, the importance of hajj, the excellence of hajj, the etiquette of hajj, and he's going to learn the conditions of hajj, things that must be done before. He's going to learn about the arkan of hajj. He's going to learn about the wajibat, things that are obligatory, but if he forgets, or if it's too crowded, or if something happens, he can still mend it, fix it, and patch it up, right? And he's also going to learn about the recommended acts of hajj, things that you don't have to do. There's no sin in not doing them, but you should do them. Polish, right? And he's also going to learn about the makruhat, things which are disliked during hajj. If you did them intentionally, your hajj would still be valid. But you shouldn't do it. You should shun and stay away from it. And this philosophy or this system is going to pertain to what? Everything else. Everything else. Everybody understand this? Khair, inshallah. All right. So the first hadith the author mentioned is hadith number 802. It's a hadith that Urwa, he narrates that he says, while I was a youngster, I asked Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her, who was the wife of the Prophet ﷺ, of course, what about the meaning of the statement of Allah, verily Safa and Marwa are of the symbols of Allah. So it is not a sin on him who performs hajj or umrah to perform the tawaf between them. I understand that there's no harm if somebody does not perform the tawaf between them. The tawaf, what's meant by the word tawaf is what? Sa'i. Sometimes tawaf and sa'i are used what? Synonymously, interchangeable. What's important is movement, haraka. Whether you're going in a circle or whether you're going in a loop, back and forth. You understand? Back and forth or around, okay? So Urwa is saying, what I understand from this ayah from Surah Al-Baqarah is that he who does not make sa'i, then there's la junah, there's no issue. His hajj is valid, it's okay. So Aisha radiallahu anha, she says, no. For if it were as you are saying, then the recitation would have been like this. It is not sinful not to perform tawaf between them. This verse was revealed in connection with the Ansar, who used to assume ihram from the idol manat, which was put aside in a place called Qudayd. And those people thought it is not right to perform the tawaf of Safa and Marwa. When Islam came, they asked Allah's Messenger ﷺ about that, and Allah the Mighty and the Exalted revealed, verily Safa and Marwa are of the symbols of Allah. So it is not a sin on him who performs hajj or umrah of the house to perform the going between them. What's meant by this authentic hadith in Bukhari and Muslim? Aisha, the master, Urwa, the disciple. Aisha is the teacher, Urwa is the student. They're discussing one of the verses of the Quran, Surah Al-Baqarah. And Urwa is telling his teacher, he's asking her, and at the same time, he's not debating with her, but they're practicing, they're sparring, going back and forth. Well, I read this, could you tell me about that? So on and so forth. Having a discussion. Scholarly, student, master, discussion. I understand, Urwa says, is that a person does not have to make sa'i between Safa and Marwa, based off of that verse. And Aisha told him, no, son, no, student, that's not the case. Rather, there is a reason behind this verse being sent down. What we study in what? Ulum al-Quran. The sciences of Quran. Asbabun nuzul. Reasons behind revelation. There is a historical context behind the actual text. Don't forget this. There's text and then there's context. Two things now. Text and context. So therefore, this isn't an isolated verse. It isn't an ayah that Allah just sent down. Rather, is a reason behind this ayah being sent down. And that was the Ansar, the natives, the indigenous Sahabas of Medina. They used to make hajj, meaning from the days of Jahiliyyah, from the things that remained from the way of Ismail. There was hajj in Jahiliyyah. The pagans, the idol worshippers, they made hajj for Allah. They worshipped Allah, as we should already know this. The idol worshippers of Mecca, they worshipped who? They worshipped Allah. Their problem was that what? There were other gods and goddesses on the side that were beneath, that were inferior to Allah. They didn't differ about that. Allah is the greatest. But they refused to make him the only one. And they refused to do away with the intermediaries. Those between them, their sins, their mistreatment of slaves, prostitution, gambling, interest, whatever's wrong that they had done. Right? And the pure and holy Allah. Alright? It's very important to understand shirk, especially in light of the different Muslims and the different doctrines of Islam. Alright? And we talk about politics and the whole concept of Wahhabi, and he came up with a new understanding, a new madhab, a new tawheed. He's making takfir on Muslims, just killing Muslims, slaughtering Muslims. It's not shirk to call upon other than Allah because these scholars here in Syria or in Azhar say this, etc., etc. Lil-asaf. Let's stick with Quran and Sunnah. Okay? The pagans worshipped whom? Allah Azza wa Jalla. That's a fact, historically. It's a fact. Nothing to do with Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. They knew Allah. They worshipped Allah. And they loved Allah. But their problem was that they would not single him out. أَجَعَلَ الْآلِهَةَ إِلَهًا وَاحِدًا. Has he made the gods into one, only one? That's something that we cannot accept. This is something which is too strange, they said. Alright? So therefore, the Ansar, these people, before Islam, they would make hajj because of what remained of the way of Ibrahim and Ismail. And they would make the ihram at a place called Qudayd. And at Qudayd, basically there was a shrine. A shrine. And that was a shrine for this goddess, this idol called Manat. Like Allah says, Manat and what? Lat, what? Uzza, and Manat being the third. Athalithatul Ukhra. Alright? So therefore, they had a problem, meaning it was a part of their idolatry and their superstition to make tawaf between Safa and Marwa. For one reason or another, they said this is unholy, this is unbefitting. We can't do this. And that's when Allah said down, إِنَّ الصَّفَا وَالْمَرْوَةَ مِنْ شَعَائِرِ اللَّهِ فَمَنْ فَلَا. Everyone understand this? So Aisha, she clarified to her student, to her disciple, that his understanding was incorrect. His literal understanding was incorrect. It was improper. It was against the context. And that it was an absolute must to do sa'i between the two. So from this one hadith, and this breakdown and this analysis, we learn tafsir, seerah, fiqh, history, and aqidah. All in one. Right or wrong? You understand this or not? So that's the context of this hadith. Before we get into the rulings of the rukn and the arkan. Next hadith, hadith number 803. The author says, Hadith Aisha radiallahu anha an Urwata قال سألت عائشة رضي الله عنها فقلت لها أرأيت قول الله تعالى إن الصفا والمروة من شعائر الله فمن حج البيت أو اعتمر فلا جناح عليه أن يطوف بهما فوالله ما على أحد جناح ألا يطوف بالصفا والمروة. قالت بئس ما قلت يا ابن أختي إن هذه الآية لو كانت كما أولتها عليه كانت لا جناح عليه أن لا يطوف بهما ولكنها أنزلت في الأنصار كانوا قبل أن يسلموا يهلون لمنات الطاغية التي كانوا يعبدونها عند المشلل فكان من أهل يتحرج أن يطوف بالصفا والمروة فلما أسلموا سألوا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم عن ذلك قالوا يا رسول الله إنا كنا نتحرج أن نطوف بين الصفا والمروة فأنزل الله تعالى إن الصفا والمروة من شعائر الله. قالت عائشة رضي الله عنها وقد سن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم الطواف بينهما فليس لأحد أن يترك الطواف بينهما. قال الزهري راوي الحديث ثم أخبرت أبا بكر بن عبد الرحمن فقال إن هذا لعلم ما كنت سمعته ولقد سمعت رجالا من أهل العلم يذكرون أن الناس إلا من ذكرت عائشة ممن كان يهل بمناه كانوا يطوفون كلهم بالصفا والمروة فلما ذكر الله تعالى الطواف بالبيت ولم يذكر الصفا والمروة في القرآن قالوا يا رسول الله كنا نطوف بالصفا والمروة وإن الله أنزل الطواف بالبيت فلم يذكر الصفا فهل علينا من حرج أن نطوف بالصفا والمروة فأنزل الله تعالى إن الصفا والمروة من شعائر الله الآية. قال أبو بكر فأسمع هذه الآية نزلت في الفريقين أو كليهما في الذين كانوا يتحرجون أن يطوفوا بالجاهلية بالصفا والمروة والذين يطوفون ثم تحرجوا أن يطوفوا بين أو بهما في الإسلام من أجل أن الله تعالى أمر بالطواف بالبيت ولم يذكر الصفا حتى ذكر ذلك بعدما ذكر الطواف بالبيت. حديث أنس بن مالك رضي الله عنه عن عاصم قال قلت لأنس بن مالك أكنتم تكرهون السعي بين الصفا والمروة؟ قال نعم لأنها كانت من شعائر الجاهلية حتى أنزل الله أن الصفا والمروة من شعائر الله فمن حج البيت أو اعتمر فلا جناح عليه أن يطوف بهما. So the two more hadiths mentioned in the chapter, Hadith 803 and Hadith 804. Hadith 803 states, narrated Urwa, I asked Aisha, how do you interpret the statement of Allah? Verily, as-Safa and Marwa are of the symbols of Allah. So it is not a sin on him who performs the hajj or umrah of the house to perform the going between them. By Allah, that there is no harm if one does not perform tawaf between Safa and Marwa. Aisha said, "O my nephew, your interpretation is not true. Had this interpretation of yours been correct, the statement of Allah the Exalted should have been, it is not a sin on him if he does not perform tawaf between them. But in fact, this divine inspiration was revealed concerning the Ansar, who used to assume ihram for worshipping an idol called Manat, which they used to worship at a place called Al-Mushallal. Before they embraced Islam, and whoever assumed ihram would consider it not right to perform tawaf between As-Safa and Al-Marwa. When they embraced Islam, they asked Allah's Messenger ﷺ regarding it, saying, O Allah's Messenger, we used to refrain from the tawaf between Safa and Marwa. So Allah revealed, verily, As-Safa and Marwa are of the symbols of Allah. Aisha added, surely Allah's Messenger, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, set the sunnah of tawaf between Safa and Marwa. So nobody is allowed to omit the tawaf between them. Later on, Urwa, told Abu Bakr ibn Abdurrahman, and he said, he told her what Aisha said. He said, I have not heard of such information, but I heard learned men saying, all the people, except those whom Aisha mentioned, and who used to assume it's haram for the sake of manat. He says, I heard them saying that when Allah referred to the tawaf of the Kaaba and did not mention the Safa and Marwa in the Quran, the people asked, O Allah's Messenger, we used to perform tawaf between Safa and Marwa, and Allah revealed the tawaf of the Kaaba and has not mentioned Safa and Marwa. Is there any harm if we perform the tawaf between Safa and Marwa? So Allah revealed, verily, As-Safa and Marwa are of the symbols of Allah. Abu Bakr said, it seems that this verse was revealed concerning the two groups, those who used to refrain from tawaf between Safa and Marwa in the pre-Islamic period of ignorance, and those who used to perform the tawaf then and after embracing Islam, they refrained from the tawaf between them as Allah had enjoined the tawaf of the Kaaba and did not mention tawaf till later. He did mention it after mentioning the tawaf of the Kaaba. Hadith 804 is narrated by Asim. I asked Anas bin Malik, may Allah be pleased with him, did you used to dislike to perform tawaf between Safa and Marwa? He said yes, as it was the ceremonies of the days of pre-Islamic period. The days of the pre-Islamic period of ignorance till Allah revealed, verily, As-Safa and Marwa are of the symbols of Allah. So it is not a sin on him who performs hajj or umrah of the house to perform the tawaf between them. So all three hadiths lead to one end, and obviously hadith 803 gives a little more extra detail, right Khalid? Whereas he mentions two groups of Sahaba. So hadith the first hadith, 802, and the last hadith, 804, along with a little bit of 803, or most of 803, the main lesson is that tawaf, sa'i, between Mount Safa and Mount Marwa is an absolute must. It must be done. And Aisha is she's clarifying, she's fixing the wrongs or the misunderstandings of her pupil, Urwa. And that it's not as you have interpreted. Your interpretation is wrong. That's not what's meant by that verse. Rather, Allah only said that based off of the superstitions and the bid'ah and the incorrect practices from Jahiliyyah that some of the Sahaba had upon entering into Islam. Everyone understand this? And also those who had an issue or problem with regards to why has Allah mentioned the Kaaba and not mentioned Safa and Marwa? Are they not holy as well? And deeper than this, we know the story of Ibrahim and Ismail and who? Hajar. And where were they?
Mecca.
What did Ibrahim say in the Quran? Inni askantu min dhurriyati. He says, I've placed some of my family what? بواد غير ذي زرع عند بيتك المحرم. I have placed some of my progeny in a barren wasteland. No fruits, no trees, no shade, no water. غير ذي زرع. There's nothing there. At your sacred house for them to do what? ليقيم الصلاة. For them to establish the prayer. And Ibrahim, he made dua, فَجْعَلْ أَفْئِدَةً مِّنَ النَّاسِ تَهْوِي إِلَيْهِمْ وَرْزُقُهُم مِّنَ الثَّمَرَاتِ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَشْكُرُونَ. He says, so Allah, please allow people to turn towards them. Please allow people to take care of them, to look after them, and give them sustenance, fruits to eat, in order for them to be thankful. Look at Mecca now. How much money is in Mecca? How many races and nationalities and languages come and live and stay and travel to and from Mecca? How much food is imported into what? Mecca. Dates exported from Mecca. And back then it was what? Ibrahim said it was nothing there. غَيْرِ ذِي زَرْعٍ. There were no trees, no shrubs, no herbage, nothing was there. So Ibrahim alayhi with his son Ismail and Hajar alayhi Hagar is mentioned in the biblical versions as well. Okay, it's accepted by the other main Orthodox faiths or religions. Orthodox, quote unquote. You get the point I'm trying to make. Like Abrahamic faith, quote unquote. Meaning Jews and Christians. It's not Orthodox, not correct. Okay? No, people, Allah knows best, those who have things in their hearts to misunderstand, right? Or to misconstrue things as they want to. What's important is that Ibrahim alayhi salam, the father of Ismail, the father of the Arabs. The predecessor of the what? Arabs. And the great ancestor of the Arabs. And there were things that were handed down and things that remained as they were. Along with much that was changed, altered, played around with, innovations made, let alone the shirk. Okay? So Safa and Marwa was considered to be something holy and sacred. But they had superstitions for it or against it. Everyone understand this? Those who wouldn't go between the two. And those who had a problem with Allah sending down the revelation concerning the Kaaba and not Safa and Marwa. Everyone understand all three hadiths now from a holistic or comprehensive view? Everyone understand or not? Type. So Aisha she's clarifying what's meant by the words of Allah, the Mighty and the Most High. All right. An-Nawawi rahimahullah, he says in the explanation of these hadiths in this chapter of Sahih Muslim, مذهب جماهير العلماء من الصحابة والتابعين ومن بعدهم أن السعي بين الصفا والمروة ركن من أركان الحج لا يصح إلا به ولا يجبر بدم ولا غيره وممن قال بهذا مالك والشافعي وأحمد وإسحاق وأبو ثور وقال بعض السلف هو تطوع وقال أبو حنيفة هو واجب فإن تركه عصى وجبره بالدم وصح حجه. دليل الجمهور أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم سعى وقال خذوا عني مناسككم والمشروع سعي واحد والأفضل أن يكون بعد طواف القدوم ويجوز تأخيره إلى ما بعد طواف أو إلى ما بعد طواف الإفاضة. So no, he says most of the ulama of Islam, not all of them, the overwhelming majority, they hold the view is that sa'i between Safa and Marwa is a pillar of hajj. Without, the hajj is null. It's no use. The majority of the ulama. Most of the Sahaba and most of the Tabi'een, such as Imam Malik, Imam Shafi'i, Imam Ahmad, Imam Ishaq ibn Rahoya, Abu Thawr, they all have that view. The second view is the view that was held by some of the earlier Muslims, some of the pious predecessors, some of the Salaf. They said that it is tatawwur. It's recommended. It's extra. And you do not have to make the sa'i. Some of the Salaf al-Salih, they had this view. And Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, he held the view that sa'i is wajib. That's it. Meaning, if you forgot or you couldn't do it or whatever, then you offer sacrifice, the animal, the expiation, blood. Okay? He says here, so these are three views here. Three views we got. So it's not consensus that it's rukn. It's not consensus of the ulama. Right? So therefore, the majority, some of the Salaf Salih, and Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah ta'ala. Tayyib. What's the benefit behind knowing this? Somebody may not make sa'i. It's too crowded, they're tired, they're injured their foot, they're bleeding, my band-aid broke, I sprained my ankle, and they said, I'll just pay for the animal instead of dealing with the sa'i. And they come from Turkey, or Bangladesh, or Pakistan, or any other country which is Hanafi. You understand this? Whether you're from Egypt, wherever it is in which they're following the Hanafi madhab. You understand this? And you may not agree with that, but that is a traditional school of thought. Everybody understand this? Someone who holds the view that it's tatawwa, that is just recommended to do, they also have precedence in that. You understand this? Nobody says the proof that most of the ulama use is what the Prophet ﷺ said after he himself made the sa'i. He said, "Khudhu minni or khudhu anni manasikakum." Learn from me the rituals of Hajj, your rituals. So the Prophet did it, and the Prophet made a clear explanation of what were the what? Rituals of Hajj, the manasik. So that's the proof that they use that sa'i is an absolute what? Must. And it cannot be fixed with an expiation. One cannot offer a sacrificial animal in place of leaving it alone. So Abu Hanifa held the view is that those who don't do it, they're sinful. Meaning it's wajib, it is mandatory, but it isn't an absolute pillar, a requirement, something that must be done. Understand the difference? All right, tayyib. So therefore, those who are Hanafi, and they choose not to make the tawaf, according to their imam, they get sin. It's not something which is just recommended. But according to Abu Hanifa, it's a must. But it isn't something what? Rukn. Fahimna al-farq am that. Understand the difference? And the same applies to what? Salah, marriage, anything else. Something is a rukn or something is not a rukn. And it's very important with regards to, like I said, it's extremely crowded, tired, mixing of cultures, people from different backgrounds. Everyone doesn't just follow one madhab or one way. Right? That's the importance of knowing it, let alone being well versed. All right, moving forward. Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, he then says, قوله أن عائشة أنكرت عليه وقالت لا يتم الحج إلا به ولو كان إلى أن قال العلماء هذا من دقيق علمها وفهمها الثاقب وكبير معرفتها بدقائق الألفاظ لأن الآية الكريمة إنما دل لفظها على رفع الجناح عمن يطوف بهما وليس فيه دلالة على عدم وجوب السعي ولا على وجوبه فأخبرته عائشة رضي الله عنها أن الآية ليست فيها دلالة للوجوب ولا لعدمه وبينت السبب في نزولها والحكمة في نظمها وأنها نزلت في الأنصار حين تحرجوا من السعي بين الصفا والمروة في الإسلام وأنها لو كانت كما يقول أروى لكانت فلا جناح عليه أن لا يطوف بهما وقد يكون الفعل واجبا ويعتقد إنسان أنه يمنع إيقاعه على صفة مخصوصة وذلك كمن عليه صلاة الظهر وظن أنه لا يجوز فعلها عند غروب الشمس فسأل عن ذلك فيقال في جوابه لا جناح عليك أن صليتها في هذا الوقت فيكون جوابا صحيحا لا يقتضي نفي وجوب صلاة الظهر. Moving forward, Nawawi states, he says that Aisha, she disagreed with Urwa, she criticized Urwa, she rejected his opinion and his understanding. And the scholars of Islam, they say that this shows Aisha's intense intelligence. And that she had a great deal of wisdom, and she had a great deal of mastery of the subtleties of Quran and Sunnah. That she was intelligent, she was learned, and she was extremely sharp. She was very sharp with regards to what was and what was not. Okay? He then says, Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, she says, is that the wording of the verse from Surah Al-Baqarah it only discusses, and it only talks about there is no sin upon those who do make the sa'i, the tawaf between the two. And the ayah, it does not speak on it is obligatory or isn't obligatory. The ayah doesn't talk about that at all. But the ayah only mentions is that there is no what? Sin upon those who do it. Meaning the sa'i could be recommended, it could be obligatory, it could be mubah. You can do whatever you want, but there's no what? Junah. Meaning from the what? The superstitions, the idols. We can't go here. This is a sin. This will make Allah angry. This la junah. There's no sin upon those who make the sa'i. Between Safa what? And Marwa. The verse does not speak on sa'i being what? Obligatory, nor does it say that it isn't obligatory. So, and this is a tremendous lesson, is that before you get into the explanation and the content, you have to be sharp on the actual wordings. The wordings, the specific wordings. What I said doesn't mean this, nor does it reject that. Everybody understand this? Everybody clear on this or not? It doesn't mean yay or nay. It's possible. Everybody understand this? I never said I did. What if? Let's say. It's not the same as I said I did, I didn't say I didn't do. You understand that? That's first and foremost. Let alone the context. So Aisha, the first thing that she used against her student was the wording. And that's why the scholars of Islam say, إِنَّ الْأَلْفَاظَ قَوَالِبُ الْمَعَانِي. The wordings are the places where you find the what? Meanings. The content is found in the actual wordings. So when we talk about text and context, you can't even get into context if you're not dealing properly with the text. Like many non-Muslims, and unfortunately weak-minded Muslims who follow them, when they talk about many things, such as jihad, fi sabilillah. They say, oh, the context behind this verse, it doesn't mean this, Allah is not talking. No. But this verse that you just quoted, it's no way that it can be interpreted and twisted and warped to what you're trying to say. Because the text is clearly stating something. Then after we've understood the text, then we get into the context. Everyone understand this? So you have two things that you must do now. You must have a precise understanding of the words, the wordings, and a precise understanding of the actual context, meaning the verse that came before it and the verse that comes after. The sababun nuzul, why the Prophet said this hadith, what companion asked him, why the companion narrated to someone else. What happened to that? All right. Another benefit here, before we go back, is that this rejects the claim of those who say that the marriage of the Prophet ﷺ to Aisha at a young age was something which was immoral, or something which was abusive, or something which exploited and took advantage of her, or something which was an act of pedophilia, or anything that they say. And that is because experts will clearly tell you and show you and explain to you is that any man or woman who's abused, violated at a young age, molested or raped, etc., the amount of confidence that they speak with in their later years of their life is slim to none. Person is oftentimes damaged. And them having the ability to stand up, let alone stand up to others, let alone to have that type of, that robust confidence, isn't something that you'll find in someone that was systematically abused and taken advantage of at a young age. So this is one among many others, many other things that we explained the other day that debunk that claim and that myth, is that the Prophet's marriage to Aisha was wrong and incorrect. That's batil. And there's so many other examples in which Aisha was on the forefront of Islamic scholarship. Butting heads, rubbing shoulders, moving and pushing and shoving with Ibn Mas'ud, with Umar, with Ibn Abbas, with the other companions, the fuqaha and ulama of the Sahaba. And Aisha said, what? No, the Prophet never said that. The Prophet never did this. Allah never meant that. You get the point? In order for you to have that type of knowledge, you have to have a great deal of what? Confidence. And that confidence doesn't come from someone who comes from that type of background. Everyone understand the point? And this is from the subtleties of that refutation. Moving forward, this also goes to show us is that a woman can be a scholar in Islam. And there is no autonomy of one sex over another when it comes to knowledge. Just because it's a man, he's automatically right. And just because she's a woman, she's automatically wrong. That doesn't exist in the Sunnah. Aisha was a female, Urwa was a male, and she told him that he was wrong to his face, and she proved to him why he was what?
Wrong.
Why he was wrong. We also see here is that it's possible for a learned scholar to misinterpret the Quran. Let alone Urwa was from the Salaf, the earliest of Muslims. And what's meant by the way of the Salaf and their understanding is what? Collectively, as a whole. And it's not one specific tabi'i or one sahabi. Everyone understand this? The understanding of one sahabi is not the what? Fahmu salaf. The understanding of one tabi'i is not the understanding of the pious predecessors. Unless they had an understanding and everyone else heard about it and agreed with it. As far as one isolated view or opinion, then that is not the way of the salaf, nor is that the understanding of the salaf salih. And this is one of the most widespread perversions of Salafiyya today. One of the most widespread. And one of the most distinct proofs of people who misuse the name and the word and the term, how they've deviated from the way of the Salaf. Is that they take one athar, in which it isn't mentioned, he was on the minbar, he was the Khalifa, they heard about it, one athar. And they say what? And they apply and say, that's what? Fahm Salaf now. What one companion did, what one Sahabi did, what one Tabi'i did. Not even Sahabi, because that's a different issue. Hassan al-Basri said this. Fulan said this, so therefore, that's my proof for me to do this and to say this and not to do that. And that's perverse. That's not the Fahm al-Salaf. That's Fahm al-Tabi'i. Huh? And the scholars of Islam, they differ on Hujjiyat Qawl al-Sahabi. Because what a companion does or says, is it a proof, let alone what? Tabi'i. You understand how, So just because a person says something or uses a term, it does not mean that they are scholastically accurate. And people, when they say, oh, those brothers are too harsh, they're refuting people too harshly, it's deeper than just harshness. If that was the only problem, it wouldn't be as bad. But we say within your refutations and these clarifications, what this sheikh is saying is khata, is wrong. It's not just that you're harsh or hasty or overkill or extreme or cliquish, but what you're saying that I have to say and I have to do and I can't go here, we say what? That's what? Khata ilmi, that's wrong. And the proof that it's wrong is, everyone understand the difference? So the concept of extremism, harshness, haste, bad character, poor behavior, clique mafia mentality, and on top of all of that we say what? Anta al-mukhti. The one writing the PDF is what? You're wrong. You're incorrect, let alone a person never even studied. Alright? And this is how we have the situation in which we live in today. Dhulumatun, darkness what? Upon darkness, unfortunately. And only a few people that Allah wants good for will have the ability to get out of it. To see it and to walk away from it. Huh? We're talking people that were exposed to it in the early days and to see it for what it's worth now. Is that there were many things that were good, alhamdulillah. There are many things that were and still are what? Wrong. And that's not from Salaf al-Salih. That's not from the ulama, that's not from Ahlul Hadith. And if it is, then it's only from some of them and not all of them. So this goes to show us how a learned person could be mistaken. He can misinterpret Allah's words. Right? Moving forward. This also goes to show us enjoining the good and forbidding the evil. And giving advice. It also goes to show one of the manners of a good teacher is to allow the student to talk and to allow discussion and debate. And that's how you formulate an actual student. That's how you forge a student, someone who has their own personality. As far as a tape recorder, as someone who just shakes and bobbles their heads, Naam Sheikh, yes Sheikh, and that's it. Then that's easy to produce. This is what I say, this is what I do, you follow, and that's it. That's easy. But to actually produce someone that has character, who has knowledge, who has the ability to think and to look and to decipher for him or herself, that can't be done unless there's that what? You have to allow them to develop. Like a child. You can't just tell your son yes, no, everything. Maybe when he's 2, maybe when he's 3. But as he starts growing up, you explain to him why. And as your son goes through puberty, he gets a little tough. I don't need you anymore. I can walk by myself. I got it, right? You all know this when we have sons. And a good father is supposed to do what? Allow him a little bit. And allow him to make a mistake. And say, see, didn't I tell you? And his son will come back and says, Naam, Abby, now I see what you said. He'll value that much more than you just forcing him, hollering at him, making him do your way. Everyone understand this? The tarbiyah. And also allowing your son or your daughter to argue with you. Abby, I disagree. I don't think that's right. I don't think that that's such and such. Oh, really? Tell me why. And if you have more proof, if I have better proof, then you win. That's how you develop a child that can survive in the real world. And that's how you develop a pupil instead of a parrot or a cockatoo or whatever you want to call it. Everyone understand this? That just makes noise and just mimics after the teacher. Some of that is necessary. Certain stages, not to argue and to debate. But there has to come a time in which the teacher allows the student to go back and forth. Let alone the fact that the student could be right and the teacher could be wrong. Or the student may have a fa'idah that the teacher doesn't have. The student may have a talent that the teacher is missing out on. وهكذا. Moving forward. An-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, she explained to him why Allah sent down this ayah. And it is like someone who says that a person something can't be done in a specific way. Like someone who has to make Salatul Dhuhr. They miss Dhuhr, and they feel that they can't make Dhuhr up at the time of Maghrib. They overslept, they missed Dhuhr, the sun is setting. And he asks, can I make Dhuhr up right now, even though it's about to be Maghrib? And the person says, there's no sin upon you for you to pray it at this time. There's no sin upon you for you to do what? Pray it at this time. He says, this proves that, he said that answer is a correct answer, and it doesn't mean that they have to make up Dhuhr at that time. Meaning you have the choice of making up Dhuhr or waiting until after sunset. If you do make up your missed Dhuhr at the time of sunset, then there's what? No sin upon you. Not that you have to make it up now, or that you, what? Ah, yeah, thank you, Ahmed. That you can't make it up right now. You guys get it or not? You understand? Can I park there? Says nothing wrong with parking there. It doesn't mean that you have to park there. It doesn't mean that you. Well, right? Right. Moving forward. All right, we'll stop here tonight, and perhaps maybe next week we'll mop up the rest of this chapter, or move on to the next chapter. The main lesson is clear. Allah surely knows best, and with Him is all success. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.